Hey everybody, happy Friday and welcome to this week's Q&As. I'm doing this in the morning, so hopefully everybody's questions would have come in from the previous week, but let's jump in and see what we got. First up is a follow-up from last week regarding how to get the Sync on Green BIOS flashed for original Xboxes, and it looks like it could be found on a newer version of the Hexen boot disk that's been patched for VGA output. So that's a good tip. Hopefully I'll get a chance to try that out at some point in the future. I do think it's a great solution for people that already just have existing SCART setups. But once again, just to reiterate from last week, if you have component and SCART or just component video solutions, just stick with that and don't really bother with anything else, because I've never seen any kind of quality difference with those. As long as you're using, of course, good quality component video cables. I'm sure there would be a quality difference of, shielded versus unshielded, regardless of what output signal you use. But yeah, it's good to know about Sync on Green, and I'd definitely like to try it at some point. Paul Gabrielson had a question about HD CRTs and wanted to know about the resolutions that they actually run at. They'd heard some people say that they're 540p, other service manuals say that everything is upscaled to 1080i, and this is something that I've kind of been curious about myself. So to give the quick run through of the information I do know is that monitors like Sony PVM and BVMs that accept all of these signals will display whatever signal is being sent. So if you send it 480p, it displays 480p. If you send it 1080i, it displays 1080i. So you never really have to worry about the professional monitors. Now, there are some HD CRTs that upscale everything to 1080i based on the chipset that's in it. You mentioned the one that you looked up had an ATI Xilion processor in it. A Samsung that I had tested absolutely worked that way, as well as a Sony, I believe. And that's not a limitation of the tube per se. That is just that the ATI chip is scaling everything to 1080i and sending it to the tube. Now, there are different CRTs that work completely differently, and I have heard people say that certain HD CRTs run at 480p natively. And somebody in the comments mentioned that 720p is a possibility for certain ones, but to be honest, I have never really gotten any kind of definitive answer, and it seems like there's multiple answers. It seems like every model could potentially be different. So unless for whatever reason you know for a fact that a consumer grade HD CRT can do the resolutions that you're looking for, I would assume that all of them add a little bit of lag and upscale everything to 1080i, and also treat 240p as if it was 480i, for all the same reasons that flat panels do, because essentially the processing chip in there is doing the same thing that would happen to any flat panel TV, just on a CRT. Now, that doesn't mean that they're useless. I personally think that PlayStation 2 looks awesome on those because the majority of the library is 480i anyway, so when you scale that to 1080i, and especially if you could take advantage of some of the widescreen modes, it actually looks really cool, and it's a very good fit for the console. And if the PS2 is your favorite console, then try and hunt one of these down and see. But for me personally, I've always been on the lookout for a consumer TV that acts a little bit more like a BVM or PVM and just displays whatever resolution's on it. So anybody in the New York area, if you have one of those for sale, let me know. I'd love to buy it and do a bunch of tests on it. But if you're looking for these yourself, I think I would just be safe and assume that any consumer grade HD CRT would be scaling everything to 1080i with a bit of lag. Oliver Clare wants to hook up a bunch of old Atari consoles to a passive RF combiner and wants to know if there's any way to amplify the signal without also amplifying the noise. No, however, you could try to put some kind of comb filter on it. So whether it's a device like the RetroTink 2XM in pass-through mode or anything else, you could find a device with a comb filter and then add that to it and then scale it from there, and that would help. But essentially the signal is already pretty noisy, so there's no way you could back it out to a better quality because the signal combining is done right on the main chips. So there's no way to get back something like an S-video or RGB signal. It is already pretty damaged. However, you absolutely could put filtering on it to clean it up a little bit. So you'd really just have to assess your entire setup and see what's the best filtering you can get. What do you need in the process, and how you could simplify the setup as much as you can. But that's really a case-to-case basis, and you're also going to have to find a device that has a really good comb filter in it. So sorry there's no easy answer to that one, but hopefully you'll be able to find out a workflow for this that'll be pretty easy and get the results that are good enough for what you need. Bad Reality wants to know if I've heard anything about if hackers are thinking of patching the official ROMs of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, at least the downloadable ones. If Nintendo were going to patch it, they would have started by now. I know there are better ROMs online, but I want to own an official ROM that functions how I think an official ROM should. Well, I'm not 100% clear on this, but from what I've been reading, these are essentially the original games, the original ROMs, with just a bunch of small changes, if any, made. And of course, it depends on the game. I may have not been reading on all of them. I may have only read about Mario 64 or something on there. So I think there are absolutely people who are dumping the ROMs from this. And I believe there's even people who have posted patches so that you could take the closest ROM, original ROM that's already out there, patch it with this, and make it exactly the same as what's in the 3D All-Stars pack. But you would really want to check individually for each game, because each game, I think, has different things applied to it. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty cool that we're still being able to preserve new old ROMs. And I think there are a bunch of people out there that have tried to do exactly what you're expecting. So I would just research individually per game and see what you find. Another one from Oliver Clare: would I also be able to recommend an individually switched power distribution unit so I could plug in multiple consoles but only run a power current to one at a time? The only one I found is the Technical Pro PS9U, but apparently these are poorly made and can be a fire hazard. No, in fact, I haven't used those in a very long time. The last time I did was a server installation, so we were able to do completely controlled power strips. So if we needed to power cycle the server remotely, we could do that. And they were expensive corporate gear, and I don't know if they're even made or if they were even known to be that good. They never failed on us, but I would be starting from scratch researching that. You've probably already done more research than me, so if anybody knows of one, though, feel free to chime in. But that's a good question, and that's one that I think probably a bunch of people with retro setups might benefit from, depending on the setup. So if there was a good quality consumer grade version out there, I'd certainly be interested. Rick wants to connect a bunch of RF consoles to a single CRT and wants to know if I know of any RF switch boxes. And while I think there are some out there, Chris Larson even chimed in to talk about them, I don't know if there's ones with many inputs. You said you have 4 consoles that you want to hook up. So what I would do is look for a 4-port mechanical composite video switch, and I would connect each of those consoles, the RF signal, into the yellow composite video jack, and then use the output yellow jack to go into the RF modulator. And you could plug the Nintendo one or Sega one or even a custom one into that if you'd like. That should work. I don't think I've ever tested that before, but I can't think of a single reason why that wouldn't work, because all you're doing is passing a single signal across an RCA connector, regardless of if it's composite or RF. So that should all work for you without a problem, and you should be able to get mechanical composite video switches for next to nothing. So I would try that out. But I guess maybe just Google RF switch and see if there's one that has 4 inputs. But if not, using composite video mechanical switch should probably work fine. Colin Kenny ended up picking up that CRT, and it ended up having S-Video, and is enjoying playing light gun games again, but wants to integrate it in their setup so that they don't have to unplug and replug stuff whenever they want to play, which is a problem that I run into all the time, because I don't have very much time to actually play games, so I either have to leave something set up on a table, which in my little apartment means that something else isn't able to get done because something's set up on a table, or I have to try to automate stuff, which never works for me because I'm constantly testing. So I totally feel your pain, and I think a good solution would be for gaming, not so much light gun games. I don't know about that, so I'll start out with a warning, but I think something like the Ashen Workshop's RGB to YC, or the open source one from Mike Chi, or I guess any Jam has one, the Linux bot. Actually, I believe I have it right here. It's the VGA to S-Video and composite. These adapters should all work with S-Video. However, they all Sorry, putting those back. They all seem to have issues with certain consoles and composite video. Now, you said specifically that your CRT has S-Video, so you should be able to use that. Even the one from LinuxBot that has the VGA input, you could just get a cable that goes from, your SCART to VGA, because it could accept RGBS or RGBHV, and then the other ones out there accept everything. The Ashen one, you could plug in SCART, and even the one from Mike, you can. So going to S-Video should be fine. You shouldn't have any issues with any consoles. It's only composite video that might have a problem, which doesn't seem like it's an issue in your scenario. I have never tested this with light guns, though. So that's something that you're probably going to want to check yourself. And I don't even know if it would differ per setup, because I've never even tested it. I'll add that to my list of things to test when I get through a video on those. Everybody involved in these projects is also looking for ways to fix composite video across all of them. And unfortunately, the only way they've found is by using very old, outdated, and no longer manufactured encoder chips, which means you have to buy repurposed ones on eBay, which have like a 25% failure rate. So it's something that people are working on, but I think there's a solution for you. I just can't guarantee anything about the light gun games. So, if you're willing to give it a try, definitely pick one up. And if I get to it first, I'll post somewhere about it. I'm 99% sure it would be like a blurb on RetroRGB about, like an official post about, here's the things I tested, and, yes, this is confirmed. So good question. Sorry I don't have a solid answer for you. Cam wants to know if there's any chance that these weekly Q&As would be available in a podcast form. So at the moment, right now, they're all available as an MP3. So anywhere that you support, wherever this post is, you could just click on that and you could stream it right through your phone. They're all 128 kilobyte mono files. So they're very small, all things considered. I think they're like 30 megabytes total. So certainly not a phone killing plan if you don't have an unlimited plan or anything like that. But that's kind of a lazy solution. And the reason I haven't put them on the main podcast yet is because I wasn't sure if that was the right fit. I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach all of this. And now we're kind of getting into where the website's going. So I'll keep talking about this, but I just wanted to make sure to answer your question first. It's available in MP3 form now every week, and I'm also working on getting it into a podcast. But here's the issue. So I've spoken to a lot of people about trying to grow the YouTube channel more just to get more exposure. And everybody agrees that I'm definitely doing something wrong, because the YouTube channel should have a lot more hits, just simply based on the amount of hits that RetroRGB.com gets. So I'm obviously doing something wrong to get killed in the algorithm. And everybody suggested that I move the lower view videos off of that. Move meaning delete and re-upload. You can't move videos, unfortunately. And I also agree. However, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that for everybody. And back in February, I had this very solid plan of exactly what I was going to do that would help the website, help all the other writers, help me personally too, gain, more footings on this stuff. And when the world shut down, all of that went out the window. So I think I know what I'm going to be doing now. I change my mind all the time, so I'm kind of just thinking out loud here. But I think all of the Q&As and all of the interviews / conversations, whatever you want to call them, are going to be removed from the main YouTube channel and put on my personal one, just RG Bob or something. And I'm also going to have a podcast opened up on all major services, just like the Weekly Roundup, under that exact same name. And the reason for this is a couple things. So first of all, now everybody could just subscribe to this and not worry about it. And anybody subscribed to the Weekly Roundup podcast only gets the Weekly Roundup. So if you're somebody that only listens to that and doesn't really care about anything else, which is totally cool, by the way, I just, however you do it is the right thing for you. At least you have that right there. And while I would move the interviews over, it's not because I don't take them seriously or I don't think they're as important. They're some of my favorite things I've ever done. But the simple fact is that most people that listen to those listen on the podcast services, like sometimes 10 times more than actually watch the video on YouTube. So while it's still important to me, while I still think some of these are very important to the gaming community, doesn't matter so much on YouTube. So I would still change the RetroRGB posts to link to those Q&As. It just would be linked off of my channel. And, that way I could feel free to kind of do a little bit more and not worry about, oh, is this going to kill the algorithm? Is this right for RetroRGB? It's my personal channel. I could put whatever I want up on there. And there's a bunch of stuff I would enjoy sharing, just little things like, hey, look at this cool time lapse I just made of a storm coming in. It's 30 seconds long, like fun stuff like that. So that's where I think I'm going with this now. But there's so many factors involved that if I hit this domino here, where is that going to land a year from now? And many people that I've spoken to said there's 3 or 4 other ways that I should be structuring things for the good of everybody, for the good of the website, whatever it is. And all of them are based on solid info but contradict each other. So I don't know the right thing to do other than I got to get these Q&As and the interviews up separate somewhere. And I am definitely going to be making them just a regular podcast service. So if you have Google Play, iTunes Podcasts, whatever, Stitcher, Amazon, they're on all of them. You could just, fire up your podcast app and wherever you see it pop up, you don't have to go looking for it. It comes to you. So sorry for kind of word vomiting about this. I just was thinking out loud and kind of wanted to share where I'm at. And as always, of course, any opinions, I'm always listening. Even if I disagree, I still listen to the opinion and take it seriously. So sorry for the very long answer, Cam. But the short version, you don't have to watch. You could just go into the app, click on the MP3 and go from there. And there will be absolutely, without a doubt, something done relatively soon to get all of this stuff up on an easier to consume format, podcast, whatever it might be. Brento got a consumer grade JVC D-Series TV, which are awesome CRTs, by the way. And when they first bought it, they noticed that the screen warps a bit when scrolling. It's as if there's a slight curve inwards and outwards on the sides of the display. They then didn't play it for a while, went back to playing it and didn't notice it as much and wanted to know if this is something that was always a factor. Will replacing the capacitors fix this? Will messing with the service manual fix this? And they're all awesome questions. So to go through everything, I'm pretty sure this is just always an issue with all CRTs. And I think that, the human brain is pretty fascinating in how we perceive things. And I think without something to compare it to, we might not have ever noticed this. But once you put it on a flat panel and you notice perfectly flat and smooth scrolling, then you go back to a CRT and that's when you notice it. So I'm pretty sure it was always like that. And almost every CRT I've ever had did that in some way, in some minor way at least. I specifically remember having a higher end TV, like a Luva Articos, that I noticed it more on. But I actually think the reason I noticed it more is because it was a much, much clearer TV. So you would be able to pick out things like that a little bit better. And at the time, flat panels were out. We were using flat panels at work, flat panels on laptops and stuff like that. So I did actually have something to compare it to at that time. But we are still talking early 2000s. So can you fix it? Well, first of all, there is always the statement of if your capacitors are bad, you could never get it right, no matter how much you tweak. However, on the opposite side of things, I replaced all the capacitors of my JVC D-Series, and it still did the same thing that you were talking about. So on something like a Sony BVM, you could absolutely get that fixed. Make sure your capacitors are changed, have everything perfectly calibrated, and it's a lot of work, but you could get there. But with consumer grade TVs, you don't have all the controls that you have on a BVM. So rather than using settings in a service menu, you'd be adding conversion strips to get the last little tweaks on the corners. And there's a bunch of other little factors in it. So it is actually plausible that even with the best capacitors and an infinite amount of time spent tweaking, that you're still not actually able to get rid of it. Sometimes it annoys me. Sometimes I just don't even care. I've been playing through Cave Story on the Mister on a PVM, and most of the time I don't notice it at all, but occasionally I'll notice it and just go, oh man, that's ugly. So I think that pretty much sums it up. I think the JVC D-Series is awesome. So if you replaced all the capacitors and it didn't do anything, know that it's not time wasted. Know that you've just bought another 20 years out of that thing and you could still just enjoy it for all of its flaws and all of its strengths. But I certainly wouldn't tell anybody like, yes, absolutely recap your TV if you want to use it right, just for this exact reason. So it's really up to you. If you have the ability to do it, it's never bad to have some preventative maintenance in there. But yeah, I just would have realistic expectations about getting rid of that weird curve during scrolling. Raw Pixel Subhuman said that while redump.org is an amazing resource for game release information, to my knowledge, has anyone gone through the exhaustive effort of creating a complete record of Japan-only titles for Saturn and PlayStation 1? All the searches turn up top 50 games, but they know the info is probably out there. They just can't seem to find it. Honestly, not that I know of. I've been referencing the redump set for a lot of different things. However, I do almost always stumble across something that's not in there. So like the Yu Suzuki Works for Dreamcast, that wasn't in the Dreamcast redump set, and that was a really cool game with a remake of Outrun in it. So I don't know if there's a definitive resource for this, but I really hope that people are working on it. And of course, if the wiki ever launches, people are always welcome to store info like that up there. So I don't know of anything, but I hope something does start to come to fruition. Photos Fine wants to know if there's any good N64 third-party power supplies like the Triads. And I do not know of any. I would not ever trust third-party replacements unless they've been really, really tested by members of the community that know how to test, not just I plugged it in and it worked. No offense. But I do think that people's suggestions of either getting new old stock or just getting a used one, opening it up, trying to replace the capacitor, make sure everything in there looks okay, I think that's probably the best bet. And in many cases, I would think that's actually the easiest. Anything that's not compatible with one of the new Triads, or if for whatever reason Triad changes their manufacturing and they're not good anymore, whatever happens in the future, you could always go and take an original PSU and try to replace the capacitor and see if that brings it back up to speed if you are having issues. But nope, not any good replacement N64 power supplies that I know of, but I'll certainly post one if I ever find it. Demo Kirby wants to know if there's anyone offering firmware update services for the Insurrection's Carby. They purchased the Carby a while back, but it has GC Video 2.4C, and they want to get it updated to version 3, but they don't want to have to buy a JTAG device and go through the trouble of doing it. So that's a good question, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people do, but I can't remember off the top of my head now who does. I remember seeing a bunch of people on Twitter mentioning that they offer the service, so I would really just talk to any modder and just let them know that it's not a standard JTAG. You need a different type of programmer for it, but if somebody's done it before, they should be able to do it pretty easily for you. So I would just kind of check with whatever modder you would normally use and just ask. Because if you have the right tools, it's not hard at all. You do have to use a GameCube to power it and then, creatively run a USB cable and an adapter around. It's kind of weird unless you have a test setup built. But it's not hard. So I would definitely just ask whatever modder you normally use. Bad Reality had a question about sync. I think I'm interpreting this right, but it seems that they have an RGB modded TV, and when they feed it RGBS, the entire image is a little bit left of center, whereas when they feed it composite video, it's perfectly centered. And in that case, there's a whole bunch of different factors that go in. I don't know what the proper wording is for it. I've heard people call it sync delay. This is not lag, by the way. This is just screen position. But you could get devices that just center the image. You could get Extron RGB interfaces that do that. The Ashen switch, SCART switch has the ability to do that as well. So I'm not really sure why the sync is delayed in that manner. And it's definitely different depending on methods of sync stripping, what the TV mod is, how the TV processes the image. But I'm not really sure exactly how to explain that, but I do know that if it bugs you, you should be able to get a horizontal centering box like an Extron RGB interface or the Ashen box. So hopefully that'll help. Jason Guffey said that their OSSC powered on briefly the other day and then immediately shut back off and wouldn't come back on. Seems to be a common problem when people use incorrect power supplies, but they're sure they used the correct one. They found out that the main fuse had no continuity and found replacement fuses, but they're still at a loss as to what caused the blown fuse. Their OSSC had an otaku switch, an Extron crosspoint, and RCA audio switcher all connected to it. Is it possible having so many consoles on and so many switches caused it to blow? And would the same thing happen again if they replaced the fuse with a new one? They did recently get some RCA Phoenix connectors for their crosspoint, so that could add the audio switcher to the mix. And I've talked about audio voltages a bit before and how they're treated differently than video. It's also worth mentioning that I'm now using a simple RCA to 3.5 millimeter audio cable to take sound from the switcher to the OSSC. Could this cable be the issue? Any ideas would be welcome. I don't want to blow it again if I somehow manage to replace the fuse in the first place. So a couple of different answers to this. First, replace the fuse, plug one console into the SCART input, and try it out and see if it works. And if audio works, if the OSSC works, and everything else is fine, then audio didn't blow it out. If audio voltage was the issue, replacing a fuse would not have fixed that at all. I think when the audio circuit blows out, the whole thing dies. I don't think just the audio dies, but check the other, the AV1 input or AV2 input, whatever the 3.5 millimeter jack, check that as well just to be safe. But if that's the case, if everything is fine and you don't have to, and once you replace the fuse, everything works, I really wouldn't worry about it. I'd buy a couple of other fuses. If it happens again, maybe replace the PSU for the OSSC. It's possible that things just go bad sometimes. And if it happens again after that, then try leaving only one set of things plugged in at a time. I just can't imagine having multiple devices plugged in would cause the issue. Only something like overvoltage from audio or just a freak occurrence with a faulty PSU or something. So I would just start by replacing the fuse and then test one thing at a time. Shouldn't take too long. Just have everything sitting right there. Just plug in one thing, test it, unplug it, plug in the other thing, test that, and then just kind of go from there. So obviously, if you replace the fuse and it doesn't work, you got your easy answer, but not the answer that you wanted. Alex Shamai wants to know if I recommend the N64 S-Video cable from Insurrection Industries. They saw Mike Chi post about it and just wanted to get my take since I didn't see it mentioned on the RetroRGB website. So I believe it's awesome. I believe it's very good quality. I don't know if it would be as good as a fully shielded coax, but now you're talking very close difference. The difference between a cheap $1 AliExpress cable and the Insurrection cable should be a massive difference, whereas the difference from that to a coax shouldn't be huge. You'd have to be upscaling S-Video to 4K to really see any difference if there was any. However, I haven't tested it. That's just a guess based on how they're made, based on who's making them and my previous experience with the cables. So I think that they should be totally fine. And for the record, the only reason I didn't post about it is because I had a feeling they were going to sell out immediately, and people get really upset with me when I post about something and it's gone the first day. So I figured I would give Insurrection some time to get some orders out, then I'll write up a post about it and kind of add all the links to the website. So it should be good, and I'll certainly let everybody know if it's not, but I believe Mike Chi tested it and he got his approval, which is more than enough for me. I'm going to be testing it too, just because I like testing stuff, not because I don't believe Mike, but you should be totally safe to buy, and I should get info on the website up there soon enough. Well, that's it for this week. As always, if you have any questions whatsoever about anything, just post wherever it is you support in the latest Q&A post. While I answer an unhealthy amount of questions across YouTube and social media, these Q&As are really just a thank you for everybody that supports, so I only answer questions in the support services. If you have another question about something, try to post in a relevant YouTube video or on social media, and I will always try my best to get to it. But with all respect to everybody, if I just answered tech questions all day, I could work 24/7, never sleep, and still not get to all the questions asked. So my apologies for everybody outside of the support services, but to everybody who does support, thank you so much. This is keeping RetroRGB and everything involved in it alive, and I do really enjoy doing these Q&As. I think it's a very fun way to interact with people. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you next week.